Trade bell with Sam Edmund in place. You have a long list, Sam. I know that. Let's start with Luke Jackson and what the anticipation of the day is.
Yeah, the anticipation expectation, as reported by Cal Toomey this morning, Jared, is that Luke Jackson will use his exit meeting to request a trade from Melbourne to Fremantle. He's been going to Fremantle since forever, let's be honest. There had been a glimmer of hope, a flicker, a murmur out of Melbourne that perhaps they were going to get to keep their man after all, but that won't be the case. And this will act as a domino for a range of movement. I mean, Brodie Grundy to Melbourne, almost a certainty now. Lloyd Meek to GWS or any of the other numerous interested clubs. And the Dockers that we've spoken about all year that had been lowballed or slow to be offered contracts by virtue of the Luke Jackson tsunami. So that's Akers, Logue, all those guys to leave the club, given they'd obviously been lowballed throughout the year, as I said, in preparation for this Jackson acquisition. So it's widely expected that his cards will be put on the table today, and he'll make that high-profile move to the Fremantle Dockers.
All right. You walk me through your list.
I wanted to start today at Port Adelaide, who are bracing for West Coast to potentially mount a raid on their forward Mitch Georgiades, Jared. So Georgiades didn't re-sign during the year. He has left an offer from Port Adelaide on the table that was presented to him relatively recently. He is contracted for 2023 as things stand, so a year to run. But he was dropped mid-season and dropped again late in the season, and that last dropping was made headlines because Todd Marshall actually came out of the team in the same week with COVID, and he still didn't survive. So the Eagles were hoping to draft him if you rewind his career. He's a West Australian, of course, and the Power have grown suspicious of the Eagles' intentions in recent weeks. Now, West Coast have picks 2, 20, 26 and picks beyond that. There's actually a bit happening at the Power ahead of Ken Inkley's last contracted season at this stage. I mean, they've lost Robbie Gray to retirement. Orazio Fantasia can't get out there. So Junior Rioli will come in. He hasn't formalised that decision, but all parties certainly expect him to nominate the Power, a club that will offer him a bit more money, but more importantly, a better city for his family to be with him and the opportunity to see his mum regularly after a year in which obviously he lost his father. So Port continue to ask the question of Cozzy Pickett, and they're very keen to get him in. If there was any way they could tempt him to come across and probably more importantly, actually satisfy Melbourne. Pickett loves the Demons, but I'm told he's not in love with Melbourne, the city. Having said that, he's contracted for next year. He is said to be committed to the Demons as we sit here right now. Like Port and Georgiades, though, Melbourne have been keen to extend Pickett's deal, but at the moment he's happy to let that ride out for now. So there's a fair bit happening in and around Port Adelaide. Both in terms of players potentially leaving and those coming in. It might be a pretty busy trade period for the Power.
All right, we had an email that said, don't hint at who I am, but I know stuff, and stuff is that Bradley Hill is going to North Melbourne.
Yeah. So the Saints are still, as of this morning, completely in the dark about Bradley Hill's intentions for next year. But you're right. The Jungle Drums continue to beat on a reunion between he and Alistair Clarkson at North Melbourne. He's got 2 years to run on a 5-year deal at the Saints, as we know, worth up around the $900,000 a year mark. North would be his fourth club. Stints at Hawthorn, Freo and the Saints. So he's been prepared to move clubs in the past, even in contract. So that one is certainly doing the rounds and has been strongly whispered for some time, albeit the Saints at the moment officially say they're in the dark.
I rather like the extra layer to this. Sam, any idea which 3 players toured the Arden Street facilities late last week after hours? None have been mentioned in the media, including one Collingwood player not in the Magpies finals squad.
I wonder what he means by that. And I wonder
Whatever do you mean, Dom?
I wonder if he's referring to a player who's out of contract at Collingwood, who we have discussed many times over this year in Ollie Henry, who is being courted by Geelong, of course. We'll get to the Cats perhaps in a moment. But North Melbourne and Ollie Henry would be a nice mix, wouldn't it? But a touring of the facilities is one that we have not cited for some time. And when they are to be revealed, they make for very titillating viewing, don't they, the touring of the facilities?
Keep going with your list.
Oh, well, with Geelong, obviously priced out of Grundy, like they were Hopper, who the latter will sign a very lucrative contract at Richmond, providing, of course, a trade deal can be struck between GWS and Richmond, all with Taranto making the same move. Now, Cats coach Chris Scott on 360 last night with you, Jared, wouldn't confirm Tanner Bruin had nominated his side, but at the same time, he did say he'd love to bring him in. Now, Ollie Henry, as I mentioned, is an option to pursue as well. He's been reluctant to sign at Collingwood during the year, given they knew Dan McStay was coming in. And the fact that offer, when it did come from Collingwood, wasn't to the level that he had hoped for. So he's held off on that. He's also fallen out of favour this year with Ash Johnson sort of coming from nowhere, coming from the clouds, if you like. So that is certainly one to watch. I wonder if the Cats reset, pivot, if you like. They wanted Hopper, they wanted Grundy, they wanted both. They miss out on both. Do they now go for Tanner Bruhn and Ollie Henry as a pretty good second prize and the promise of much more from those two players? Josh Dunkley, we spoke about on Crunch Time on Saturday. Just
just let me give you a Josh Dunkley one.
Fire.
I just want to keep our little flow going.
Sorry.
Where's my Josh Dunkley? Oh, this is poor, isn't it?
No, that's all right.
There was a take it to the bank, Josh Dunkley to the Brisbane Lions for next year.
Yeah, so I was just going to mention them. I mean, we spoke about it on Crunch Time on Saturday. The logic says the longer it goes, the more it appears Brisbane is the most likely destination, given there's been no announcement and the Lions season's still alive. And there's generally an etiquette to these sort of things when players are nominating clubs who are still in the finals race. Now, we know the family connection and the girlfriend connection. So his sister Lara plays for the Queensland Firebirds in Super Netball. Girlfriend Tipperdoani signed, but only signed at the Adelaide Thunderbirds for the 2023 season. And she went to school in Brisbane and was raised there as well. So I think if you're looking at this logically, and we can overthink things, Josh Dunkley had a contract, hasn't re-signed forever at the Western Bulldogs, hasn't nominated Port Adelaide despite having several weeks to do so. What's the hold-up? It just has to be Brisbane, doesn't it, Jared? So we wait. We thought Brisbane wouldn't go this far, and maybe Josh Dunkley didn't either, and that's why we've got this state of limbo with him.
It was Mark who texted through, take it to the bank. Josh Dunkley will be a Brisbane player this trade season. Let me just interrupt with one more. Stuart on the central coast of New South Wales. I heard yesterday that the Irish newspapers are reporting Conor McKenna will be looking at Brisbane or Port Adelaide for his AFL return. I love this from out across the world.
That's not too bad, is it? So Conor McKenna, of course, made headlines a few weeks ago telling his county side that he wanted to come back to play AFL to have another crack at it. I've spoken to Brisbane about this. Now, the Lions' information is that Conor McKenna wants to come back to Australia, but he doesn't want to come back to any state. In fact, he wants to come back to Victoria. So that's the initial feedback from them. They do have an interest, and they have had an interest before. We know that. I think whether they're playing it down or not, they don't expect to be a factor when it comes to Conor McKenna.
Please don't use my name. Hunter Clark toured the Kangas facilities.
Yeah. Were we going to talk about St Kilda tomorrow, perhaps? Because there's a bit happening at the Saints when it comes to the direction that they want to take. And it is at a very curious juncture, isn't it? They've attempted to really build rapidly for a crack at finals and the pointy end of finals and a flag. It hasn't quite worked out. And now what do they do? So we're talking about Bradley Hill earlier. Hunter Clark's name's just come up and has done for a while. So we might flesh St Kilda out perhaps a little bit more in depth tomorrow.
I like it. Have you got one more you'd like to leave us with?
This text caught my eye here. I can tell you that Dunkley is getting a 7-year deal, not at the Dogs, from Anonymous. Aren't 7-year deals the complete and utter norm now? They're not even an eyebrow raiser for mine. I know Kane's trekking across the.
No, I'm with Kane here. I'm with Kane. They're an eyebrow raiser for me. I think good players getting 7-year contracts is nothing short of bizarre.
You think good players getting 7-year contracts?
I think great players, game shapers getting 7-year contracts is fine. We have lowered the bar remarkably.
Yeah, but what of the need to balance the books and to smooth the money, as it were?
Yeah, I still think that has the potential to be list clogging at the back 3 years of your 7-year deal. I'm really surprised how liberal clubs are with 7 years.
What if they're grossly front-ended?
Yeah, I think 7 is too long for anything but a game-shaping superstar. That will.
No, they get 8. They get 8 and 10 years.
Yeah. So some of the 7-year contracts. I think players have won the lotto in recent times. The absolute lotto.
Was that you that was saying the best thing one can do?
Yep.
No,
the
GWS?
best thing there's a special pocket of the football economy that is dedicated to players who get drafted by GWS, and the best thing that can happen to you as a good player is to get picked up there, and you either get a preposterously long contract to stay, or you get a preposterously long contract to leave. That's where I am. Alistair, last one for you. I'm hearing that Blake Acres isn't the only Docker on his way to Icon Park. Carlton is also keen on Liam Henry and Griffin Logue.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll jot them down. We'll jot them down, Jerry.